You want to turn your entire house into a vertical farm? Because your HOA doesn't like your rooftop garden? Exactly, I said, nodding enthusiastically. Think urban jungle meets high-tech agriculture. Think edible walls. Think the greenest house in Skyline Estates. There was a pause. Then Sarah started to laugh. You're serious? Dead serious, I said. I have a point to make, and a lot of tomatoes to grow. We have the technology, we have the design, we have the bylaws. And I said, I want this done fast. Mr. Miller, Sarah said, I love it. This is going to be the most amazing project we've ever worked on. But are you sure about this? It's a bit unconventional. Unconventional is my middle name, I said. Well, actually, it's David, but you get the idea, I said, smiling. The sun warmed my face as I plucked a perfectly ripe, ruby-red tomato from the vine. The air was filled with the scent of basil and the gentle buzzing of bees happily pollinating my rooftop garden. It was a little slice of paradise, a green oasis perched atop my townhouse in the otherwise meticulously uniform landscape of Skyline Estates. Skyline, of course, being a relative term in a community where anything above ground level seemed to be viewed with suspicion by the HOA. I took a bite of the tomato, the sweet juice bursting on my tongue. This, I thought, is what it's all about. And then I saw him. He stood at the bottom of the stairs that access my roof, clipboard in hand, his face already set in a disapproving frown. He was the HOA representative, and I knew, without a doubt, that my peaceful morning of rooftop gardening was about to be interrupted. I, Kevin Miller, am a gardener. Mr. Miller? He asked, his voice tight with barely suppressed annoyance. That's me, I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. Can I help you? I'm Mr. Straight-Laced from the Skyline Estates Homeowners Association, he announced, as if I hadn't already guessed. We've received a complaint regarding your rooftop garden. My garden? I repeated, feigning surprise. What about it? I knew exactly what about it. My rooftop garden was my pride and joy. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. A carefully cultivated collection of raised beds and containers overflowing with tomatoes, peppers, herbs, lettuce, and even a few experimental strawberries. It was a testament to my love of fresh, homegrown food, and my belief that even in the heart of suburbia, you could create a little bit of green, sustainable paradise. Mr. Straight-Laced cleared his throat, his eyes scanning my rooftop garden with an expression of undisguised distaste. It's unapproved, Mr. Miller, he said, and unsightly. It violates the architectural harmony of Skyline Estates. Unapproved? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. I wasn't aware I needed approval to grow tomatoes. I looked around. There wasn't anything about rooftop gardens when I moved in. The HOA, Mr. Straight-Laced continued, ignoring my comment, has received numerous complaints. Residents are concerned that it's lowering property values, attracting pests, and, well, it's simply not in keeping with the character of our community. The character? I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. You mean the endless rows of identical townhouses with identical beige siding and identically manicured lawns? I thought I was adding a little diversity. Mr. Straight-Laced was unmoved. The rules are clear, Mr. Miller, he said, tapping his clipboard. No, unapproved structures, or landscaping modifications, that detract from the overall aesthetic. He was just reading from a script, I could tell. It's a garden, Mr. Straight-Laced, I said, trying to remain calm. It's plants. It's food. It's actually beneficial to the environment." "It's a violation, Mr. Miller," he countered, "and you need to address it immediately." He handed me an official-looking notice, his expression suggesting he'd just delivered a death sentence. He then turned and marched off, his clipboard held high like a banner of bureaucratic triumph. I, Kevin Miller, was officially at war with the HOA over tomatoes. The HOA meeting was, predictably, a soul-crushing experience. It was held in the Skyline Estates community room, a space that seemed to have been designed to be as sterile and uninspiring as possible. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige everything. The board members sat at a long table, looking like a collection of disapproving owls, and presiding over them all was Edna Edwards, the president of the Skyline Estates HOA and the undisputed queen of all things orderly and under control. She was an older woman, impeccably dressed in a power suit that probably cost more than my entire gardening budget. She had a perfectly coiffed hairstyle, a permanent frown etched onto her face, and an air of authority that suggested she'd personally approved every blade of grass in Skyline Estates. She was, in short, my nemesis. "Mr. Miller," Edna began, her voice sharp and accusatory, "your rooftop garden has been brought to our attention." She said rooftop garden, as if it were some kind of contagious disease. "My garden, Miss Edwards," I corrected, trying to keep my voice even, "is a source of fresh, healthy food. It's a hobby. It's a way to connect with nature." "It's an eyesore, Mr. Miller," Edna declared, her voice rising in pitch. "It's lowering property values, it's attracting pests, and it's setting a dangerous precedent." "A dangerous precedent?" I repeated, incredulous. "What, are people going to start growing their own food? Is that the danger?" "It's unapproved, Mr. Miller," she continued, ignoring my comment. "It's unsightly. It's not in keeping with the architectural harmony of Skyline Estates." "It's on my roof, Edna," I said, my patience wearing thin. "It's barely visible from the street. And frankly, I think it's a lot more attractive than some of the other architectural choices in this community." I subtly gestured towards a nearby townhouse with a particularly garish paint job. A few nervous coughs echoed through the room. Edna's face turned a shade of red that clashed violently with her, presumably, HOA-approved power suit. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice dangerously low, "are you familiar with the HOA bylaws?" "I've read them," I said, "and I don't recall seeing anything that specifically prohibits rooftop gardens. As long as they don't, I don't know, pose a safety hazard or interfere with other residents, I believe I'm within my rights." "The bylaws are open to interpretation, Mr. Miller," Edna said with a smug smile, "and my interpretation is that your garden is unacceptable." She went on to announce they're planning to add a clause to explicitly ban rooftop gardens. The other board members, a collection of mostly middle-aged men and women who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few of them, I noticed, were actually looking at my photos of the garden, which I'd brought along, of course, with expressions of interest. Perhaps they were secret gardeners, yearning to break free from the beige tyranny of Skyline Estates. But Edna? She was unmoved. "The garden," she declared, slamming her gavel down with unnecessary force, "must be dismantled. You have 2 weeks, Mr. Miller, and you are hereby fined $400 for violating the architectural harmony of Skyline Estates." Architectural harmony. It was a rooftop garden. I walked out of that meeting, my blood boiling, my sense of injustice reaching critical levels. Edna Edwards had declared war on my tomatoes. And I, Kevin Miller, was not about to surrender. 2 weeks. That's all the time Edna Edwards, in her infinite, power-suited wisdom, had given me to dismantle my beloved rooftop garden. to tear down my little oasis of green, to destroy my source of fresh, homegrown tomatoes, all because it didn't conform to her narrow, beige-tinted vision of architectural harmony. 2 weeks to, absolutely, positively, not comply. I, Kevin Miller, was not a dismantler of gardens. I was a builder of gardens, a cultivator of gardens, a champion of all things green and growing, and I was not about to let Edna and her band of HOA bureaucrats destroy my horticultural masterpiece. It wasn't just about the garden anymore. It was about principle. It was about freedom. It was about the right to grow your own food on your own property, even if it happened to be on your roof. My internal monologue was a delightful mix of outrage, determination, and a growing fascination with a new, slightly insane idea. "They want to take away my garden," I muttered to myself, pacing my soon-to-be-former living room. Fine, let them try, but they're going to have to deal with the consequences. I needed a plan, a strategy, a way to fight back, to defend my gardening rights, to make Edna Edwards' head explode. And while they were planning to implement the new rule, I needed time to plan. So I stalled. I sent emails, I requested meetings, I did everything I could to delay the inevitable while giving myself time. My weapon of choice, as always, was the HOA bylaws, combined with a healthy dose of internet research. I started digging. I researched HOA power, landscaping restrictions, and most importantly, vertical farming techniques. Because, as I saw it, if they didn't want a garden on my roof, I'd just have to find somewhere else to put it. Somewhere bigger. I went back to the dreaded HOA bylaws. My constant companion, my source of both frustration and, increasingly, inspiration. I needed to find a weakness, an ambiguity, a loophole large enough to drive a truckload of tomato plants through. I read and reread every section, every clause, every footnote, searching for the key to my victory. And then I found it. It was in the section on rooftop structures and modifications. There were restrictions on height, on visibility, on materials, and this was the crucial part. There was nothing, not a single word, about plants, about green walls, about covering the existing structure with living, growing things. There was the usual vague clause about maintaining the exterior appearance of the home in a manner consistent with community standards, but that was subjective, open to interpretation, and, I suspected, easily defensible. Maintaining the exterior appearance, I muttered, a slow smile spreading across my face. Oh, I'll maintain it, all right. I'll maintain it with vegetables. The seed of an idea, a gloriously green and slightly terrifying idea, was starting to sprout. I needed to act fast, because they approved their new rule a few days later. Operation Vertical Farm was born. My plan was simple in its audacity. I wouldn't just keep my rooftop garden. I'd expand it. I'd transform my entire townhouse exterior into a massive, high-tech, food-producing vertical farm. I'd cover the walls with plants, creating a living, breathing, edible ecosystem. It would be a multi-story wall of greenery, a vertical jungle of tomatoes, peppers, herbs, lettuce, strawberries, anything and everything I could grow. It would have automated irrigation, grow lights, and a sophisticated nutrient delivery system. It would be a testament to my love of gardening, a monument to sustainable living, and a giant, leafy middle finger to Edna Edwards and her beige-loving HOA. I'd argue, of course, that it was simply an extension of my existing rooftop garden, a living wall, a vertical landscape enhancement, and therefore perfectly compliant with the HOA bylaws, the old ones at least, and even sort of compliant with the new ones. Because it wasn't a structure, it was plants. And who could argue with plants? I could already picture Edna's reaction, the sputtering outrage, the vein throbbing in her forehead, the inevitable meltdown. It was a beautiful image. I knew it was ridiculous. I knew it was probably going to be expensive. But I didn't care. This wasn't just about gardening anymore. It was about rebellion. It was about fighting for my right to grow food on my own property, even if that property happened to be vertical. My first step was to find a company that specialized in this kind of extreme gardening. I found one online, Vertical Veggies, a company that, according to their website, could transform any wall into a thriving, edible ecosystem. Perfect. I contacted them, and after sending them the new bylaws, I spoke to a representative named Sarah. "So, let me get this straight," Sarah said, after I'd explained my vision and my situation with the HOA. "You want to turn your entire house into a vertical farm? Because your HOA doesn't like your rooftop garden?" "Exactly," I said, nodding enthusiastically. "Think urban jungle meets high-tech agriculture. Think edible walls. Think the greenest house in Skyline Estates." There was a pause. Then Sarah started to laugh. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I said. "I have a point to make, and a lot of tomatoes to grow. We have the technology, we have the design, we have the bylaws, and I said, I want this done fast." "Mr. Miller," Sarah said, "I love it. This is going to be the most amazing project we've ever worked on. But are you sure about this?" It's a bit unconventional." "Unconventional is my middle name," I said. "Well, actually, it's David, but you get the idea," I said, smiling. We discussed the details. They had a modular system of planters, trellises, and irrigation lines that could be attached to virtually any surface. We'd choose a variety of edible plants, suited to the local climate, and my, somewhat ambitious, growing goals. We'd incorporate grow lights to ensure optimal growth even on shaded walls. And we'd install an automated system to control watering, nutrient delivery, and even pest control. And so, construction began. Trucks arrived, carrying pallets of planters, rolls of irrigation tubing, boxes of grow lights, and, of course, hundreds of plants. A team of workers swarmed over my townhouse, attaching the modular system to the walls, installing the trellises, connecting the irrigation lines. It was like watching a botanical invasion, a green army conquering the beige facade of my home. The neighbors, as expected, were fascinated. They gathered on their sidewalks, staring at the rapidly transforming townhouse, their expressions a mixture of shock, amusement, disbelief, and the inevitable question, what on earth is that man doing? I, of course, played the part of the eccentric gardener perfectly. I'd stroll around my yard, wearing a straw hat and overalls, offering vague explanations about vertical landscaping and sustainable food production. My internal monologue was a constant stream of triumphant pronouncements and giddy anticipation. "Take that, Edna Edwards," I'd mutter to myself as another row of planters was installed. "Enjoy your architectural harmony now." I imagined her face contorted with rage, her perfectly coiffed hair, probably, standing on end. It was a beautiful thought. There was, of course, a brief visit from an HOA representative, not Edna, thankfully. She was probably still recovering from the shock of seeing the first truckload of plants arrive. "Mr. Miller?" he said, looking up at the rapidly expanding wall of greenery, his voice a mixture of confusion and apprehension. "We've received some concerns about your project." "Concerns?" I repeated, feigning innocence. "What kind of concerns?" "Well," he said, stammering slightly, "it's rather extensive and unconventional." "It's landscaping, Mr. Straight-Laced," I corrected with a perfectly straight face. "And, as you can see, it's all plants. No structures. Just vertical vegetation. Perfectly compliant with the bylaws, I assure you." He looked at the wall of plants, then at the bylaws, then back at me. He clearly had no idea what to do. He mumbled something about reviewing the situation and retreated, looking utterly defeated. I, Kevin Miller, had once again outmaneuvered the HOA. And my vertical farm, my edible monument to HOA defiance, was nearing completion. The anticipation was almost unbearable. The neighborhood was buzzing, and I, for one, couldn't wait to see the final result. And, even more importantly, I couldn't wait to see Edna's reaction. The completion of the edible estate, as I'd grandly named my vertical farm, was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. My townhouse, once a perfectly ordinary, if slightly rooftop garden-enhanced dwelling, was now a towering, verdant spectacle. Walls of green, punctuated by the vibrant colors of ripening tomatoes, peppers, and strawberries, stretched towards the sky. It was a living, breathing, food-producing ecosystem, clinging to the side of my house. It was breathtaking. It was absurd. It was everything I'd hoped for. And, of course, Edna Edwards arrived within the hour. She didn't even bother with the pretense of knocking. She just stormed onto my property, which technically was now mostly covered in edible plants, her face a mask of fury, her power suit practically crackling with indignation. "What?" she bellowed, her voice echoing through the previously peaceful neighborhood. "Have you done?" I emerged from behind a particularly lush patch of basil, a picture of calm serenity, holding a basket overflowing with freshly picked vegetables. "Good afternoon, Edna," I said, my voice smooth and even. "You're admiring my vertical farm, I presume?" "Vertical farm?" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the wall of greenery. This is insane. You've turned your house into a giant vegetable wall." "It's the edible estate, Edna," I corrected, with a perfectly straight face. "And, as you can see, it's perfectly compliant with the old HOA bylaws. Remember that clause about rooftop structures? Well, this is just an extension of my rooftop garden. A vertical extension. And it's all plants, Edna, not a structure in sight. I knew they changed the rules, but I had a plan." But it's covering your entire house," she stammered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's efficient," I countered with a shrug. "Maximizes growing space, and it's quite aesthetically pleasing, don't you think? So green, so alive, so unlike your personality." It's attracting pests," she declared. "I saw a bee, and it's probably full of slugs." "The bees are pollinators, Edna," I explained patiently. "They're essential for the ecosystem. And as for slugs, well, I have my methods. I'd installed a few strategically placed beer traps, organic pest control, of course. Plus," I added, holding up my basket of produce, "it's incredibly productive. Care for a tomato, freshly picked this morning, grown right here, on my wall." Edna recoiled as if I'd offered her a live snake. This will not stand," she vowed, her voice hoarse. I'll have this thing removed. You'll see." She turned and stomped off, leaving a trail of sputtering outrage, and I suspected a few crushed artificial flowers, in her wake. The emergency HOA meeting, Part 2, the vegetable vendetta, was, if possible, even more chaotic than the previous ones. Edna, looking like she'd subsisted solely on coffee and outrage for the past few weeks, presented her case with the fervor of a possessed lawyer. The HOA had voted and passed the new rules, making sure that no structures or modifications could include plants. This edible estate," she declared, her voice shaking with emotion, is an affront to everything Skyline Estates stands for. It's a safety hazard. It's an eyesore. It's going to attract vegetarians. I'm not sure where she got that one. She'd even brought in a so-called agricultural expert, a guy who looked suspiciously like her nephew, wearing a lab coat that was clearly too big for him, who testified about the dangers of uncontrolled urban farming and the potential for widespread pest infestations. It was all nonsense, of course, and I could tell even some of the board members were starting to roll their eyes. Then it was my turn. "Miss Edwards," I began, addressing the board with a calm, reasonable demeanor that was, of course, completely fake, "seems to be under the impression that I've somehow violated the HOA bylaws. I assure you, when I started construction, I had not." I went on. "I've created this for the neighborhood." I presented my case meticulously and methodically. I cited the previous bylaws, the ones in effect when I'd started my project, highlighting the fact that there were no restrictions on plants growing on the house. I argued that my vertical farm was simply a very elaborate garden, and that I had a right to grow food on my property. I presented evidence of the farm's benefits, the fresh, organic produce it provided, the reduction in my carbon footprint, and the positive impact it was having on the community. Many neighbors had already expressed their admiration and even asked for gardening tips. And, just for good measure, I'd brought along samples of my harvest. A basket overflowing with ripe tomatoes, plump peppers, fragrant basil, and sweet strawberries. I offered them to the board members, inviting them to taste the fruits and vegetables of my labor. The other board members were, to put it mildly, divided. Some were clearly still loyal to Edna, but their support was rapidly dwindling. Others looked confused, overwhelmed by the sheer audacity of my project, and a few, I suspected, were secretly admiring my ingenuity and enjoying the fresh produce. Then, a woman from the back of the room stood up. She was a local chef, a resident of Skyline Estates I'd met at a neighborhood barbecue. "I have to disagree with Ms. Edwards," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I think Mr. Miller's vertical farm is amazing. It's innovative, it's sustainable, and it's producing some of the most delicious produce I've ever tasted. In fact," she added with a smile, "I'd love to feature some of his vegetables in my restaurant." That was the final blow. The board, facing a potential lawsuit, a public relations nightmare, and the undeniable evidence of my farm-to-table deliciousness, voted to do nothing. They couldn't. The meeting ended in chaos, with Edna screaming about the downfall of society and the rise of the vegetable menace, and me, Kevin Miller, the vertical farming visionary, walking out with a smug, but well-deserved, I thought, smile on my face. But Edna, like a particularly persistent and pesticide-resistant weed, wasn't about to give up. What followed was a period of escalating absurdity that I can only describe as the farm fight. Edna, obsessed with getting rid of my vertical farm, or at the very least making my life miserable, tried every tactic she could think of. She filed complaints with the city, claiming it was a zoning violation, a safety hazard, and a public nuisance. The city inspectors came, they inspected, and they found nothing. My vertical farm was perfectly legal. She tried to organize a neighborhood petition to have it removed. She went door to door, armed with her clipboard and her "think of the property values" speech, trying to convince people that my edible walls were a threat to their peaceful, vegetable-free existence. The petition failed miserably. Most people either politely declined to sign or slammed the door in her face. Some even offered to help me tend my vertical farm in exchange for fresh produce. She even, I suspect, attempted some minor acts of sabotage. I found a few, easily removed, "Keep Skyline Estates Beautiful" sign stuck in the ground near the base of my tomato plants. And one morning I woke up to find a section of my lettuce mysteriously nibbled. Apparently she was hoping to unleash a horde of hungry rabbits on my farm. It didn't work. Of course, I had security cameras everywhere, capturing her every move. And I, of course, responded in kind. Not with vandalism, oh no, I was above that. I responded with creativity. I started hosting farm-to-table dinners for my neighbors, using the produce grown on my house. We'd gather on my now vine-shaded patio, enjoying delicious meals made with ingredients harvested just steps away. It was a celebration of community, of sustainability, and of course of my victory over the HOA. I donated excess produce to local food banks, earning the praise of the community and further solidifying my image as a benevolent and slightly eccentric urban farmer. I created a vertical farm website and social media presence, showcasing my project, documenting my battle with the HOA, and offering tips on vertical gardening. It became a minor internet sensation, attracting followers from all over the world who cheered me on and offered suggestions for new plants to grow. And, because why not, I started a community garden program, encouraging other residents of Skyline Estates to grow their own food, in a slightly less extreme way, of course. I even offered workshops on vertical gardening techniques, sharing my knowledge and my passion with my neighbors. It was a glorious, ridiculous, utterly over-the-top spectacle. And with each passing day, with each new harvest, with each new act of defiance, I could feel Edna's frustration growing, her power waning, her sanity slipping. The vertical farm had become more than just a source of food. It was a symbol of resistance, a testament to the power of creative and slightly unhinged rebellion. And I, Kevin Miller, the accidental urban farmer, was winning. I even started my own farmer's market in the neighborhood, inviting those with gardens.